Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia lost can be found. This video is going to contain my review of the latest Summon Showcase. It's another prize showcase this time around, introducing Valyx and Phares, the royal siblings, as playable adventurers, alongside a brand new wind element dragon, Michael, who is the pact-bound dragon to the apostle Basilius. So these are all characters we've known for a while now, are finally playable, or at least playable as a dragon in the form of Michael, in the game. I'm super excited about this showcase. I think it's quite a strong one, and unfortunately it's also sandwiched between limited summons. That means it's going to be a little hard to decide whether or not you should pull here. So in particular, this time of year is always quite busy with these seasonal showcases. It started in late December with our Dragon Yule showcases, then for New Year's we had our Zodiac adventures, and looking ahead to mid-February, we might also get some limited characters for Valentine's Day as well. So summoning resources have been scant as a result of all these lucrative summon showcases, and besides everything seasonal, we've also just gotten Gala Emil very recently. It's still live at the time I'm recording this, and before that, a very fun permanent pool adventure in the form of Kimono Knot. So it's a tough decision of whether or not you want to summon here, and it's genuinely not that easy of a choice, I feel. You can always wait on these showcases until toward the end of the banner, where we'll get a preview of what's coming up next, and in this case, I would strongly encourage you to do so because the next showcase might in fact feature returning Valentine's Day characters, perhaps some new limited ones, and we've also been told to expect in the mid-month showcase a character who's existed in Dragalia Lost before, but never before been playable. So I think that might mean another of the Agito becomes a playable adventurer. It could also mean a side character in one of our previous event stories or adventure stories, or it could even be our shopkeeper, Nina. So you never know who that character is going to be. Maybe it's the summoner from the summoning sessions. Who knows who that's going to be, but there are reasons you might want to hold out here toward the end of this showcase before you really make your decision. And regardless, I don't know that you can go too wrong because, frankly, a lot of our showcases have actually been quite good recently. There have been a few here and there, Dragon Specials, Elemental Focus showcases, that you can kind of universally skip, but I feel like the development team overall has done a pretty good job of making it so even these banners with more permanent pool adventurers have consistently been quite good and had new characters with powerful effects, good utility, that give you a valuable showcase regardless of the point that you're jumping in with this game. So I think that's true of this showcase too. Was very impressed when I looked over Valyx's kit, and I think Phares brings some unique utility to the table too that could help in future endgame content, with Michael surprising me at how good he was for a permanent pool wind dragon. So all in all, I think this is a strong showcase, and you're gonna have to make your decision basically based on the resources you have, and also weighing just how much you like these characters one versus another. If you're a huge Emil fan, you might have summoned on that showcase, not leaving you a lot of resources here. If you're a huge Valyx fan or Phares fan, it's probably gonna mean you're gonna want to skip out on Emil and go for them instead. That's just the way that I see it. Let me know what you end up deciding to do in the comments below. Where I'm at personally is, I do have this Diamantium here, but I'm gonna try be disciplined with it, wait until the end of the period to make a decision about whether or not to summon, at least until I see what's coming for Valentine's Day. And unfortunately, that's also gonna mean for me that despite using my daily deals here, I'm not gonna go any further trying to pursue Gala Emil, so I am gonna miss out on him for now. But that's my take on things. He looks strong, Valyx looks strong, Phares looks strong, all of them look good. It's just a matter of where to put your resources, really. So let's talk about this prize showcase now. It's gonna be around from February 4th until the 13th. As I mentioned, Valyx is available, Phares is available, and Michael, with Valyx being a light axe, Phares being a wind lance, and Michael being a wind dragon. It is a prize showcase, but the caveats that I give normally on these applies. The prizes are nice to have, they're a nice bonus if you're summoning anyway, but what you're really pursuing here are the characters or the dragon that's on the showcase. The prizes are just an added bonus, but they're not a reason to summon. in and of themselves. So let's go ahead and take a look at the characters here. We'll do a quick gloss over. Valyx, looking super good, of course. And I think, as we'll talk about, brings some nice affliction utility, real good tankiness to him, dispel as well. He looks very, very good. Dual affliction resistances too. Phares, his kit is all about afflictions, and so I think he might also have interesting roles to play in Iblis, but he can cleanse a team of afflictions, he can make afflictions on the enemy last longer. There's also a little bit of a nod here to possibly a dragon that he's associated with, maybe has a pact with, or otherwise, at least for now, is just available through Dragon Drive. But he doesn't have the dual resistances like Valyx, and Phares struck me as maybe a little bit weaker or more gimmicky than Valyx, with both being good, but just a little bit weaker than Valyx. And then Michael here, Michael has close quarters and range combat, just like Basilius did, with different effects depending on which way you use his skill, and also the ability to give overdamage to your team just by having this dragon equipped, not even necessarily shapeshifting into the dragon. So that's something you don't see too often on a dragon, is an ability passively like that that benefits your team in such a big way. So all these three look like they have potential to me. Let's go ahead and get into the discussion here. As I said, I think it's a good showcase. I think there's value to summoning on it, but you really just have to met out your resources and decide, do you have enough here? And personally for me, what that would mean is I'd probably summon on this one if I was either content with getting any of the three and had a good amount of resources for like 100 to 200 summons, or if there's one I really wanted, I probably wouldn't summon unless I had enough to get those 300 worm sigils worth to be able to guarantee that spark, and hopefully if you're in that situation, you'd get the other two along the way as well, although that's not a sure thing. Anyway, let's go ahead and start reading through the kits here, starting with Valyx. So you will know my pride for I am unbending. Just love the development of his character, the fact that he aspires to royalty. He has all these traits of being a noble ruler, a warrior king, as it were. But at the same time, sometimes he has difficulty accepting his own feelings and own desires and tries to set those aside in his pursuit of nobility. And I think we got in this event some good developments with him where he realized he had to forge his own path. And it wasn't always about just doing what was honorable and following in the footsteps and molds of previous kings. In order to be a king in his own right, he had to put forward his own viewpoint, his own preferences, and cut his own way forward. So of course, the fourth scion of Valbyria, and a man renowned for his military and leadership prowess, though he generally keeps to himself, his love for his country and people speaks volumes. After serving the Empire for a time, he now works with the Halidom in order to save the world. Love the background art here too, of course, with Thor in the background, his pack-bound dragon. His skills are Royal Blitz, which is shareable with a cost in points of 5. This one deals damage to enemies directly ahead and inflicts paralysis and flash burn. Pretty low skill energy cost to damage ratio. It looks like a nice amount of damage for a first skill, considering you're getting both afflictions. Of course, it's going to cost more when shared. But the fact that you're getting both afflictions, I see this as a very good thing for Iblis, whose legend difficulty is going to be releasing later this month. That is a fight where even on the master difficulty, there is significant pressure applied to be able to consistently afflict Iblis. If you're not able to do enough afflictions within given time limits, your run is over, he wipes your team. So in the phase where you use Wind Adventurers, you have to cause both Stormlash and Poison, and in the phase where you use Light Adventurers, you have to cause both Paralysis and Flash Burn, alternating. So if it's Flash Burn, you need to do it multiple times, and if it's Paralysis, you need to do it multiple times in a row. The great thing about Valyx is he's going to be contributing to you in both of those segments of the fight. A lot of times, the experience I've had with Iblis, and it's not too hard on the master difficulty, but I feel like it'll ratchet up on legend, but the experience I've had is I'm usually stronger or more dominant in one affliction than the other. The reason I find this to be the case is usually I'm going to run one healer. That takes up a slot on my team, and that healer's not generally a primary affliction enabler. Sure, they may have an Affliction shared skill, they may be helping out a little bit, but it's usually 1 healer and 3 DPS, I think, for most people out there, right? And now your 3 DPS, even if all 3 of them are packing Afflictions, you're probably not going to be completely balanced between the Afflictions. You might have 2 characters that cause paralysis and 1 that causes flash burn, or you could have 2 that cause flash burn and 1 that causes paralysis. And so, because of that, I would say usually one of the Affliction phases is a little bit more difficult than the other, or at least applies slightly more pressure to be able to keep good uptime on your Afflictions in order to make sure you don't lose the run. So in my experience, what that's looked like tangibly is I usually only have 1 flash burn character and 2 paralysis characters. If I have to apply paralysis to Iblis, it's no problem. My 2 backline characters, they take care of it. But if I have to apply flash burn, I have to really make sure my rotations are on point. And for that reason, usually I'll throw a flash burn skill, shared skill, onto my healer as well so that they can help out in those flash burn segments. The thing I like about Valyx is that he's going to be able to take up a DPS slot in that battle and contribute in both segments where you have to cast or apply either Affliction respectively. So I really do like that about him. I think it's not to be underestimated, and paralysis has kind of made a return a little bit, even in the Mercurial Gauntlet, where it's gotten better in the harder difficulties. It actually can be applied more effectively now. I think there's lower resistance from Roy starting off, so it's been pretty good there. And certainly I feel like Valyx will be a good match against Tartarus too. Being able to apply these Afflictions is just going to increase your damage output over time overall, and that's going to be pretty effective. It is a little bit warped in the light element what strategies exist because of Chronos Nyx. You could do some crazy things that weren't possible beforehand, like dragon soloing and stuff like that, to where, depending on your strategy and approach, you might not actually need that many good light characters. But I think that there is enough content out there where having a well-built 4-character light team matters, that this is still going to be a great character to have in your roster. So besides Royal Blitz, we have Lightning Rampage. This one just deals damage to enemies directly ahead. Costs more skill energy, of course, with it being a second skill, that's pretty much the norm. But good amount of damage with that final hit doing a lot. And dispels 1 buff from each target. So your dispel, you're not going to be dispelling all the time, but you have it on your second skill. I just like that it's available. It's an option in Valyx's arsenal, so he can be another one of the characters on your team. Let's say you're playing against Tartarus, there are segments where you have to dispel a lot. You don't have to necessarily, you can kind of just ignore it, but in co-op he does stack up a lot of buffs on himself. If you want to dispel them all, this is an option that's going to help overall with your team success in doing so. Legend Tartarus has been out for a while, so again, if there's some Chronos Nyx strategies out there that kind of completely sidestep this, I would get that, but I still see this as a positive attribute of his kit. I think Dispel still comes up often enough, and looking ahead to the Primal Great Worms, as far away as Zodiark may be, Zodiark may buff his own defense just like Primal Midgard Swarmer, where having random Dispel, even if infrequent on your team, still can contribute. So I like the utility here on both of these in combination with good damage output. And one of the reasons for the good damage output, as we read ahead here, is this first ability, Stalwart Warrior 2. So we'll get into that in just a moment, but to nod to the co-ability and chain co-ability, the co-ability is your standard defense, which you see on most axes, and the chain co-ability is going to give your team of light adventurers on your team at least HP regen whenever you have a team defense amp. So that's also a pretty nice survival-focused chain co-ability. But this ability, Stalwart Warrior 2, is what I think is going to push Valyx's damage output to a very significant level. So when shapeshifting, the user will transform into Thor regardless of what dragon they're equipped with, and it grants the user a unique force strike that draws enemies toward the user. In addition, it grants the user immunity to knockback for the duration of quests, permanently energizes the user, and when the user takes damage, grants them the Defiant Spirit effect for 20 seconds. So Curse of Nihility and Afflictions will not reset the user's energy level, nor will using skills. And during Defiant Spirit, which you get when you take damage for 20 seconds, damage dealt by the user's standard attacks and their area of effect are increased, After it's granted, it won't be granted again for 5 seconds. Also restores 30% of damage taken during skills or attacks as HP. This effect also activates while charging skills or attacks and during the transformation sequence while shapeshifting. Wow, so there's a lot to unpack in this ability, but the thing that I want to highlight is they kept his special transformation to Thor. They make it so he's permanently energized for an entire quest, and his energy in particular, it cannot be removed. It cannot be removed by afflictions, it cannot be removed by Curse of Nihility, and even when you use a skill, you don't lose your energy. So all his skills, you have to view through the paradigm that they're going to be energized, which is that 50% extra damage boost on your skills. That's a lot more than most characters are able to get in a passive. Most skill damage passives on adventure kits cap off at like 35%. So that's pretty significant in of itself. And he's actually a character who can utilize the Gala Thor dragon even in Nihility content because he's permanently energized and immune and really reap the rewards of having super high strength with Thor equipped. I'm not saying Thor is necessarily going to be better than Kronos Nyx or than Gala Reborn Jean, but the fact that he can use him, he's a good AI character on your team to throw your Gala Thor onto that you invested in all so long ago, and it's still going to be very effective. And of course, there is that drawback though, that because he always transforms into Thor, maybe it's more of a trade-off than a drawback, but because of that, he's not going to be able to cheese with Kronos Nyx like some other characters can. So do keep that in mind, but this Thor dragon form he has, it's probably still going to have that good skill that's a powerful nuke that regular Thor has as well. And sorry if you're hearing some noise in the background here. It's really cold where I am now. A lot of snow on the ground, so there's a heater running. So apologize for that if you're getting some interference on that end. But anyway, I feel like Gala Thor and Valyx, they're gonna warm us all up, y'all. I mean, look at this. Look at this. And you're immune to knockback? And when you get damage, your standard attack's area of effect increases. So this is also going to be super fun to play in the Kaleidoscape. I will warn that immunity to knockback, while generally a positive, there are certain moves and situations where that can be a negative, or you want to take knockback so you don't get repeatedly bludgeoned or get caught in like a pool of venom and just die. So that is a little bit risky. But then the fact that you have this built-in restoration too, where you're healing, you're getting lifesteal, 30% of damage. Oh, damage taken. Okay, sorry, not lifesteal. If you're getting hurt, if you're getting hurt while you're attacking or using skills, you'll heal some of it back. Hey, that's fine. That's also a good form of passive healing as well, because if you have that knockback immunity and you're getting to use your skills and combo off unimpeded, you're probably going to be getting a lot of hits from smaller foes, and so this is also pretty good, I think, to be able to restore some of that. Against bosses, too, that could be pretty nice. So all in all, I like what I'm seeing from Valyx here. I think that he would work well in multiple different contexts. I think that the afflictions will come in handy against Iblis. The sustain and regenerative capabilities will probably be pretty good in the Kaleidoscape. And axes are generally pretty good in the Kaleidoscape too, with their big weakness being you want some Catherine skills, Lara Noah skills, some way to deal with the high hit count enemies that you have to hit multiple times to defeat. But otherwise, I think that he's going to be pretty effective there. And then just the damage potential, being permanently energized, I feel like they really did our boy Valyx right here. I feel like they really did him right, so I'm happy to see this. And then, continuing on, he actually gets the dual resistances that you typically only see on Gala Adventures. Very few permanent pool adventures have this. Some of them do, like Ilia, or some of the Mana Spiraled adventures have it as well, but still kind of a special treatment, I would say. So both Poison and Curse he's completely immune to. And then Royal Shield 2, his last ability, when the user's HP drops to 70%, grants the entire team a team defense amp with a maximum team amp level of 2, and a one-use divergent shield that nullifies damage up to 40% of the user's max HP. This shield can stack with ordinary shields. After activating, the ability won't activate again for 30 seconds. So also another nice defensive ability that's going to combine with the Chain Code ability to also give regen. What strikes me is I feel like the devs have pushed and been more aggressive with amps recently. It used to be you just get a solo amp, you have to amp it up, and it takes some time. We had several characters as of late that give a full team size amp to everybody in your party on first activation of their effect. So Emil did this with strength and defense amps, and now Valyx is also able to do this with the defense amps too. And then that one use shield, it can come in handy in situations where there's unavoidable damage, and frankly, sometimes you just get hit by stuff accidentally, and it also comes in handy then as well, even if you're not playing optimally or anything like that. So there's one last remark here about Valyx's ability Stalwart Warrior 2, and it just clarifies that it permanently energizes him during quests. Abilities whose activation requires the user's energy level to be increased or the user to be energized will not activate, excluding at the beginning of quests or when Valyx is revived. So if you've seen any abilities like this on other characters, think of like energized equals strength, or energized equals critical rate, or energy level +1 equals critical rate +3%. If such an ability existed, it wouldn't really work for Valyx because he's basically statically sitting at 5 energy all the time. Another thing I want to point out with Valyx is energy also affects the potency of healing abilities as well. So there is some potential here that you could throw some healing shared skills onto him, especially if you're using him as, let's say, a lead character in auto. And that might be pretty good too. That might be pretty effective. Shared skills you don't use as frequently, and because they're shared skills, their potency is reduced. I think it's to 70% of what it'd normally be. So that is a trade-off. I think there are good enough healers in the light element that you don't have to forego a healer necessarily, but that could be some good supplemental healing if it's needed in some kind of auto setup. Overall, I just see Valyx as a strong adventure. I think the damage potential is nice. The sustain is really nice. Utility with afflictions and dispel, and the amps too. This is a character that I really like. I'm just glad they did him justice. And I think the thing to just consider is, what type of game do you play with your light characters? Are you somebody out there in co-op who is blazing through everything with Kronos Nyx and Gala Yuden? Are you somebody that's trying to play a grindier game and more focused on auto and solo play, not necessarily leaning on some of those dragon-centric strategies? That is another thing I don't bring up too often in these videos. I think is worth considering all the time. When you're looking at these summon showcases, especially as resources are tight, does this character fit your playstyle? Because now, with how Dragalia Lost is, you can pretty much do everything solo, you could do everything co-op if you want to, and so that is an important consideration. Who are the other light characters that you have and that you like to frequently use? I think Valyx is going to fit in with a lot of different types of team comps, but depending on what your setup is, if it's already working really well for you, and you're only looking at prospective future content, then I think where Valyx may stand out is really with the double affliction that he applies, but I'm not so sure about everything else. I think that the damage burst is nice, but is the trade-off that you're now, not as focused on your dragon damage in the light element, which can be so powerful. So all in all, a character I really like. I think he's great. Let's move on to talk about our next adventure here, Phares. So love the background, mad scientist vibes. He's doing his research, of course. He's got his book. Let us begin our inquiry into truth. I want a castle story with him in Heinwald. Please make it happen. Okay. The second scion of Elberia and a man of nearly unparalleled intellect, he becomes a puppet of the progenitor in order to battle his worm scale. After regaining his freedom, he has been using his knowledge to his fullest extent in order to save the world. Love that. He's a wind lance, so was definitely curious what weapon type he would be, what element he would be. In recent events, we've seen him use wind-based attacks more often. I think there's also kind of like a weird tie between him and Void Zephyr. I definitely have a mental association there between those two, so that was maybe just a silly reason that I thought that he might be wind related, maybe only one fabricated in my mind. But yeah, he is a wind element. I think we've seen him holding a lance perhaps before. So yeah, he is a wind element lance. And his skills are Wisdom Talisman, Oath of Bonds, with co-ability of HP, standard on lances, chain co-ability, wind, no afflictions equals strength plus 6%, Uranus's Blessing, freeze res 100%, and then Thirst for Life 2. Wow. Okay, so we have a lot to get through with Phares here, so let's go ahead and get started. His first skill, Wisdom Talisman, grants all teammates a shield, increases their water resistance, and increases their chances of inflicting afflictions. If it's used during Dragon Drive, a variant called Punishment of Heaven is used instead. Punishment of Heaven deals damage to enemies in a line and inflicts poison and Stormlash. In addition, it will deal bonus damage to targets with Victim of Science. Dispel one buff from each of them, then remove Victim of Science. The bonus damage will be increased against enemies inflicted with any affliction. So, to break that down, if you're not in Dragon Drive, this is just a defense-oriented buff. Mostly defense-oriented. You get a shield, it's 50% of max HP, which is sizable. That's might be the biggest regular type of shield that we have out there. Water res plus 8%, which lasts for 25 seconds. So you're going to be able to increase water res pretty consistently here at this skill energy cost. And for 30 seconds, your team is also going to have their affliction success rates increased by 40%, and it stacks up to 3 times. That is very intriguing to me. So, as I mentioned when we were looking at Valyx, Iblis is all about applying afflictions. I wonder in the Legend difficulty, are there going to be some ways in which he inhibits the team that you're using from afflicting him properly and makes it so his resistance gets super high and you really want something like this? Not sure. Not sure what to make of that, really, because I think that most affliction-inducing skills are usually pretty effective. On the Master difficulty, it seems like when he alternates between Ballad of Heaven and so on, you can usually afflict him consistently when he's in the moment of vulnerability to one affliction or the other. You know, Stormlash or Poison and Flashburn or Paralysis. So I do wonder if they're going to sort of change up some of the mechanics and this will actually be more relevant. But in principle, I feel like it's generally not too bad to just consistently afflict bosses repeatedly. So it doesn't strike me as something that there would be a great need for, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But when you are in Dragon Drive form, this skill is going to deal damage. It's going to dispel buffs and cause poison and cause Stormlash. So just like what I said about Valyx being able to apply both afflictions at once, that would also apply to Phares here. And you get this nice bonus modifier, this killer effect against enemies that are afflicted. Now, to be clear, let's see. So it always causes poison and Stormlash, but the bonus damage, the killer effect, and the dispel are only going to happen if the enemy has Victim of Science on them. And we're going to read on about what that is, but it's basically a debuff that I think you can apply by force striking the enemy. So, yeah, you're not always going to get this bonus damage, the dispel, or the killer effect, but you will get the afflictions. But hopefully, in principle, you'd be able to keep this Victim of Science up repeatedly. So, interesting. Really centered around afflictions, and I guess maybe they're trying to play at the worm scale that he has as kind of an affliction that he's super interested in and then also interested in curing, because with Oath of Bonds here, this skill removes all afflictions from the entire team, grants them a team strength amp, and partially fills the user's Dragon Drive gauge. If the user has the fatigue debuff, this skill will also remove it. So the fatigue debuff, to spoil ahead a little bit, it's basically Phares gets a free revive of sorts every quest, and afterward he is fatigued, and he can't enter Dragon Drive while he is fatigued. And so that's something very unique to Phares. We've seen a few other characters with mechanics like that, but I think that his actually seems like a genuine good revive that doesn't rely upon the revive system from what I can tell. So we'll read on about that later. But otherwise, you know, when you're not in Dragon Drive, cleansing all afflictions, that's good. Team Strength Amp is good. partially filling the Dragon Drive gauge is good. I think the way that we should evaluate both of these skills is that their abilities when you're not in Dragon Drive are fine, but this seems like a character for a good damage output where you're going to want to be able to be in and stay in Dragon Drive when you're really trying to push your damage. So here's the variant when you're in Dragon Drive. It's called Uranus's Claw. Uranus's Claw grants the entire team a team strength amp, deals damage to enemies directly ahead, and extends the remaining time of any of the following afflictions inflicted on enemies hit by this attack by 15 seconds. Poison, Burn, Paralysis, Frostbite, Stormlash, Flashburn, Shadow Blight, and Scorch Rend. So it looks like pretty much all of the damage over time inflictions are included here. The remaining time of these afflictions cannot be extended beyond their original duration, and after activating, the extension will not activate again on the same target for 15 seconds. So the last part is honestly a bit confusing to me, and I'm not sure what to make of it, because it says it extends the remaining time by 15 seconds, but it also cannot be extended beyond the original duration. So I don't really know what to make of that. If it can't be past the original duration, that makes it sound like it would do nothing in my head. If it lasts 15 seconds and you extend it by 15, but it can't go past the 15 it started at, what does it really do? So I'm not sure what to make of this last sentence. My expectation is it basically gives you 15 extra seconds, but then you can't double up. So let's say, my understanding is, let's say poison normally lasts 15 seconds. You're on second 14 and you use that skill, you're going to get an extra 15 seconds out of your poison beyond what you normally get, but then you can't chain it. That's kind of what I think. So once you're in second 29 of a poison that was originally going to last 15 seconds, you can't go beyond that because the original duration was only 15. That's kind of how I'm understanding it, but I could be off on that. And damage okay. Team strength amp is nice. Once again, no solo amps here. It's jumping straight to the team strength amp level, which I appreciate. Max level 1. Let's see, we didn't check that on Valyx. Did they show that on Valyx? They didn't show it from what I can tell. For his defense amp max level. Might be 1 also. So that's a little bit low, but something that you could boost with your teammates, potentially. But the fact that you jump up to the team strength amp is nice for content with Curse of Nihility. And being able to extend the duration of these afflictions, it could be good. It's going to give you better uptime on your affliction punishers, which I think is something that we often abstract away from how we think about the game. A lot of times when you equip a Poison Punisher or a Stormlash Punisher Wormprint, the assumption is, or the inherent assumption is, you're basically going to afflict the enemy with that the entire duration of the battle, so it's going to be worth it. And that's not always universally true, but especially against Iblis, where Iblis can shut off certain afflictions during the ballads that Iblis has, well, having your afflictions last into the next ballad, so having your poison last into the Stormlash segment, should probably greatly help with enabling dual Punisher strategies or double Punisher strategies. The other thing I think that's worth pointing out with the Legend difficulty content is we've seen this with, I guess Lilith might be the example that comes to mind the best, but a common strategy with Lilith, especially now that we got another set of Flashburn Punisher Wormprints from our most recent event, a common strategy you could take is you can actually bring a Flashburn shared skill in the first phase where you use water characters because Lilith is still susceptible to Flashburn, and then in the second phase, if you have a character like Summer Chell, you can lower Lilith's Flashburn resistance and basically make it so that you can use Flashburn in both phases effectively. So when I see a character here like Phares and think ahead to Iblis, maybe what you'll be able to do is something like bring Poison and Stormlash on your light team with, let's say, Formal Joachim shared skill. And even though you're causing Poison and Stormlash in the first phase, it's not going to hurt you in the second phase because you have your Phares to continuously be able to apply those afflictions. I guess it really may not work that way if Iblis ends up being completely immune to other types of afflictions in the different phases, but I think in principle, that's kind of the type of stuff that you could do here with the ability to extend afflictions, or even if he's in one ballad or the other, just the fact that your Stormlash is going to keep ticking over into the next ballad still could help with double punishers for phase 2 of Legend difficulty. So I think there's potential there, but it feels more obtuse to tease out than it was with Valyx, I think. Anyway, we continue on with past Oath of Bonds and the co-ability and chain co-ability. So the co-ability is your standard for lances. The chain co-ability, no afflictions equals strength plus 6%. So if your team members who are wind element are not afflicted, they're going to get an extra 6% strength. I don't think this will be affected by Curse of Nihility, but it could be. But I feel like they'll make it immune because it's a new character, and a lot of new characters have worked that way. But some of the other buffs like this, where you get a plus X%, they're visible buffs that do get removed, like Frostbite equals plus 13% strength. That does get removed. These kinds, I don't think they get removed. So even though it's small, I think it'll be available at the least. And then Uranus' Blessing 2 grants the user a strength amp with a maximum team amp level of 1 when the user inflicts an enemy with an affliction. After this amp is granted, this ability will not grant it again for 8 seconds. So that's just a user amp. So you are going to get those by just afflicting the enemy. So you could get that through your first skill, for example, when you're in your Dragon Drive form. Also grants the user a Dragon Drive gauge and changes the Shapeshift button into a Dragon Drive button. Tapping this button activates their Dragon Drive. The user's Force Strikes will fill their Dragon Drive gauge if they connect. So that's interesting because we've seen some Dragon Drive characters like Belina who can permanently stay in Dragon Drive essentially. There are others like Urias who their Dragon Drive is just going to run out over time. Once you're in Dragon Drive, there's nothing you can do to continuously refill your gauge. In Phares' case, his Force Strikes are going to refill his gauge, and what that makes me think is like maybe he's going to have a rapid fire Manicaster style Force Strike when he's in Dragon Drive form, and something as simple as that would be pretty powerful and would honestly up my estimation of him quite a bit, just because I think that's such a good way of attacking a lot of current content. Rapid fire Manicasters, a lot of them have built-in extra Force Strike damage through passives, but just in general, it's a pretty smooth playstyle where you get SP fairly rapidly, you can move around and avoid enemy attacks. It's usually just a pretty effective playstyle with the way enemy AoEs currently work, especially for characters who want to actually use their skills for damage rather than just their Force Strike itself, because then you get those iframes spaced in nicely. So I'm not sure if it's going to work that way or how it'll work, but the unique Force Strike or the Force Strikes aspect has me intrigued here. Dragon Drive grants the following effects. The user's standard attacks are changed. I should have read this first. The user's standard attacks are changed and fill the user's Dragon Drive gauge if they connect. The Force Strikes are changed and deal damage to multiple targets and enemies near those targets. They will also apply a Victim of Silence effect to enemies hit. So, should have read that first. So when you're in Dragon Drive, ignore what I said about Rapid Fire Manicaster style. Both of your types of attacks, your standard attacks and Force Strikes, are both going to fill your gauge. So as long as you keep attacking, you should be able to stay in your Dragon Drive state, hopefully. And the Force Strike in particular is some kind of AoE type Force Strike. It hits multiple targets and enemies near them, and that's what's going to apply a Victim of Science. So when that's applied, the user's strength is increased by 35%, and the user's HP is restored when they are hit by an attack that inflicts an affliction. After activating, the effect won't be activated again for 10 seconds. That's interesting. So, I see. This is another bullet point on Dragon Drive. So in Dragon Drive, you have 35% extra strength. That's not part of Victim of Science. It seems like Victim of Science is just like a label applied to enemies that then powers up Punishment of Heaven. So in Dragon Drive, you get more strength. and your HP is restored if you're hit by an attack that inflicts an affliction. So maybe there's like Menoetius synergy here or something like that. Or maybe you put a shared skill that lets you burn yourself. I'm not sure. I think that might be a little bit too cute, but after activating, that won't activate again for 10 seconds. Still a pretty good bevy of abilities and effects for Dragon Drive. And of course, this just allusion to Uranus, who I don't think we've actually seen, but not sure if this is maybe the Pact-bound dragon that caused Phares to get worm scale. That could be something fun to read into in the adventure story. But not an actual shapeshift, just a Dragon Drive. Freeze res 100%, so sadly Phares does not get the dual affliction resistances, but I guess it's okay because he can cleanse all afflictions, and it's pretty easy to get full bog res if you really want it through the Sinister Dominion Worm Prince and now our Kaleidoscape slot anyway. You have enough slots to juggle and be able to get those affinities elsewhere if you want them. And then finally, Thirst for Life 2. So this is something very unique. It reduces susceptibility to afflictions by 150% during Dragon Drive. So I guess there you go. If you're in Dragon Drive, you shouldn't be getting bogged anyway. Also during Dragon Drive once per quest, when the user would take damage greater than their remaining HP, that damage is instead nullified, and their Dragon Drive gauge is completely consumed. So remember, once per quest, damage from attacks that forcibly reduce the user's HP to 0 or deactivate Dragon Drive cannot be nullified in this way. So I think when we talk about that, that's probably talking about like screen wipe, run-ending attacks that hit everything and deal like infinite damage, make it so you automatically lose a quest. I don't think it can necessarily block out those. Also, with the exception of damage dealt by afflictions, buffs, debuffs, and certain attacks, the user will be temporarily invulnerable to damage while the effect is being activated. When activated, this ability damage nullification effect also removes all afflictions from the user and applies the fatigue debuff to them for 60 seconds. During fatigue, the user cannot activate their Dragon Drive, and their Dragon Drive gauge will not be filled. So that's the fatigue thing that we saw earlier. When you use your second skill, you can get rid of it, or it'll last 60 seconds, and you can't use Dragon Drive during that time. I think that the representation here is maybe this is Phares kind of coming back to life from his condition of Dragon Scale, or also maybe just relinquishing himself from the constraints of the progenitor and the progenitor's influence. This is just a very flavorful, cool effect that thankfully seems a lot more effective than like Kimono Elisan's chain co-ability, or co-ability rather, with extra HP on revival, or Halloween Melce's ability with extra HP on revival, where you actually have to use one of the revives in the quest, and so therefore it's not that great. I mean, I've joked in the past, like with Melce, I always make sure to die once so I get maximum value, so I get my revive HP back, but it's actually not a good thing. This actually seems like a good thing because it totally sidesteps that revive system. It's a free resurrection exclusive to Phares. This can only mean shenanigans in my mind. And granted, you shouldn't be taking damage that deals more than your maximum life total often if you want to succeed in a battle. But there still probably could be situations where this comes up, and it's helpful to be able to get this free revive. I feel like it's more of a novelty thing than an actual effect. Like, I think the main effect here is you can't get afflicted when you're in Dragon Drive, and that could matter for Frostbite because there's not easy ways to resist that right now. But yeah, this is a very curious effect. It takes me back to the glitchy old days. I remember using Eleonora to defeat High Brunhilde's trial back in the day. There used to be a glitch where characters didn't die until they hit the ground. And so, because Eleonora's skill made her jump in the air, she could jump in the air, get hit by Brunhilde's opening blast, and if you had a healer on your team who was really precise with their timing, they would heal, and she would not actually die, even though she took lethal damage, because she would get healed mid-air and then land on the ground and be alive. And that is actually how I ended up clearing that content with her before she could even survive the damage check on that. In co-op, of course, and thank you to the people who helped me do that over numerous trials. But there used to be a lot of little things like that in the game, going out of bounds and all sorts of shenanigans you could get up to that I feel like have been ironed out largely. They're probably still out there for players who are really interested in that type of thing. But this kind of mechanic just reminds me of that good, fun novelty space that doesn't come up too often, but like maybe somebody out there is going to put this to good use, like taking on some off-element content that Phares really isn't suited to, but because of this, he's actually able to like sneak in and survive, and just, it makes for a fun story. So I like this. Hopefully somebody can use it in that way. And let's see, this is just about the skill effects when used as shared skills, and level 80 and 50 mana nodes unlocked, yada yada, the usual disclaimers here. But ultimately, I feel like Phares doesn't quite bring as much to the table, and it's just more of a mystery. Like, what are Iblis's mechanics really going to look like on the Legend difficulty? Will Phares square up against those particularly well? Because I think we have ample options on the earlier difficulties. We have our Tiger Worm Clan leader that we got this year, a great new wind adventurer who you can put to good effect. Basilius wasn't released all that long ago, a character a lot of players summoned for because of just how much utility Basilius could bring. When I see Phares, the Affliction Cleanse is potentially nice for Frostbite. You know, you do have these defensive effects, and you have the Dragon Drive with Dispel and Afflictions. I guess there's a lot here. No overdamage. It's hard to say. It's hard for me to say. I mean, the dual Afflictions with Dispel and Cleansing Afflictions in principle, probably going to be good against Iblis for the same reasons that I talked about with Valyx, where just being able to apply both afflictions is kind of a good thing. I'm not sure. Maybe he's going to be just as good, just as tanky in the Dragon Drive form, just as good for autos with that Resurrection and Kaleidoscape. But on paper, Valyx stood out to me a little more. As we read through Phares, though, probably quite good adventure too, all the same. Okay, so finally, wow, this has been a long one. Finally, we come to Michael, our Wind Element Dragon here. With Seraphim Wings, I shall guide you, Wanderer. One of the dragons known as the Five Archangels, a pleasure seeker whose behavior often confuses, his true thoughts are impossible to ascertain. Though he appears delicate, his power is without peer, and he guides people and dragons alike based on the strength of his own convictions. So portrait looks great, of course. In the background you have the Heavenly Wings form, the original form or progenitor form of Michael during the Imperial War. The skill is Angelic Storm. During close quarters combat, it deals damage to surrounding enemies, inflicts poison, and grants the entire team a team defense amp. And during ranged combat, deals damage to the target and nearby enemies, inflicts Storm Lash, and grants overdamage to the entire team. So you have a choice. If you're up close, you're going to deal damage to surrounding enemies and cause poison for only 15 seconds, but you do get the team defense amp, so more survival focus. If you're at range, it deals damage to the target and nearby enemies, and you get Storm Lash, which lasts longer. You get the overdamage, which is the full 40% potency, and it lasts 180 seconds. So that strikes me as probably the better of the two options. But if you have another source of overdamage on your team, you wouldn't necessarily have to do that, but that's enough time of overdamage. You might be able to use this dragon to forego a proper source of overdamage in some cases. Maybe not all the time, but depending on the circumstances. Now, there are a lot of good Wind Element dragons. Gala Beast Volk, Gala Zephyr, Fudo Myoo. We also have Midgard Stormer Zero, just the ability to screen wipe everything and apply wind res down on the boss. That's also very good. Freya is really good for healers in particular, and has the energize and regen over time skill. So I think wind's kind of a competitive element at this point for new dragons. But the overdamage is interesting. It's just, you only have so many shapeshifts, and if you're trying to get Midgard Stormer Zero debuffs on a boss, then if you're in solo, that's probably going to mean you're not getting these overdamage effects from Michael. Maybe in co-op, if you're coordinated, everybody brings different dragons, you could do this. But same thing with Beast Volk. If you're trying to get off amps and drain the boss with the Blood Moon, then you're not going to be doing this necessarily. So I think that that's the trade-off. And for Yaldabaoth in particular, which is the current battle ahead of Iblis, where you'd use Wind Element Adventurers, and by the way, I think Phares would be totally fine and appropriate for that. But in that in particular, your dragon transformation opportunities are restricted because of the Twisted Blessing attack that Yaldabaoth does. So you can't just spew out dragons as one is wont to do, especially with all these Dragon Haste prints from Kaleidoscape. Like, you get a lot of dragons, but you can't shapeshift that many times unless you're very carefully managing the Twisted Blessing timings and going back and forth to shapeshift. So for that reason, I think it's maybe a little worse than it appears on paper. Like, these look like great effects for this dragon, but I think that you're not always going to be transforming into Michael to actually pop these off. And without this extra 3 minutes of overdamage, that's a pretty significant thing that you're losing from the full potential here. The abilities are good though, so strength 60%, kind of a baseline nowadays, and then Michael's Favor 2, if the user is attuned to wind, extends the combo counter, or the window between hitting an enemy and the combo counter resetting by 2.5 seconds, and for every 15 hit combo increases the user's strength by 3%. This strength increase can stack up to 10 times and is removed when the combo counter resets. So basically you can get up to 90% here. And I'm assuming that these are not like a visible buff that's affected by Nihility. If they are, that would ultimately be pretty terrible. Also grants Wind Attune Adventures in the team overdamage based on 20% of the user's strength for 60 seconds at the start of quests, and grants the user overdamage based on 20% of their strength for 60 seconds when the combo counter resets. So not sure what to make of this either. I mean, 1 full minute of overdamage is nice, but a lot of overdamage effects you can get 40% instead of 20%. Now it is 20% on a strength-focused dragon, as opposed to if you get overdamage from like a healer that has Freya, might not be as good. But I guess even Freya now, well, I don't know. I don't think she got extra strength. I can't remember with her Dragon Unbind if she got extra strength or not, but suffice to say, like the 20% overdamage, I'm not sure. Overdamage is a very good effect. Having it for 60 seconds is nice, but I think you can get better overdamage from character skills, adventurer skills. And then the fact that to get it back on the user, you have to reset their combo counter, well then you're going to lose the 30% strength that you accumulated, so that doesn't seem great. Now there's more here. In addition, regardless of the user's attunement, while shapeshifted as Michael creates a combat zone around the user. Okay, so basically this is the combat zone. It grants them one of two styles, close quarters or ranged. If any enemies are in your zone, you're going to do close quarters combat, otherwise you're going to do ranged combat, and it's going to affect your standard attack patterns and the Angelic Storm skill. So that's just some text about the different modes of combat. I think that the ability, again, it kind of like reads better than it probably will be in practice. The overdamage is kind of nice. It's cool that that could be built in and doesn't require you to shapeshift or anything for that first 60 seconds. So potentially a good character for speedruns, maybe? I mean, that's a big asterisk as I'm not really in the time attack business anymore. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know here. It's certainly a good dragon. Like, a lot of dragons are much better than the standards we were used to way back in the day, where 60% strength was like the gold standard. And now with 5th Unbinds and all these Gala dragons, Aito dragons, I think that you have to do a little more. So I'm not totally sold on Michael, but I think that he's still pretty good, all things considered. Like, relative to our historical norms, it's still a pretty good dragon. If you don't have a lot of wind dragons and you're going for these other characters, probably not a bad dragon to pick up. I just don't know that I'd be rushing to spend Sunlight Stones if you have other wind dragons in your collection like Fudomyo O or some of the Gala dragons to invest in instead. Even Midgard's Former Zero, I think, has a lot of utility with the screen-wide attack. But anyway, y'all, I think that is going to do it for today. Wow, I can't believe how long this video went on. Hope you've enjoyed this long-form discussion of our upcoming characters here. We'll probably post this the day the banner releases because it's going to take a little while to upload. But had a lot of fun talking about the new characters, and I'm really considering summoning on this one. We'll see where our resources end up over the next couple of weeks and what's coming next. but I really want to get Valyx and Phares both, if I'm being honest. A little greedy trying to get both, but I just think they look super cool. So I'm hoping that's what happens, but we'll see. I'm going to try to be disciplined until then and not blow any resources. That is going to do it for today, though, everyone. Let me know if you'll be summoning on this one in the comments below. Thank you, as always, for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.